work, and he was owed. And so on that basis, I began to pray for justice on his behalf. And when he submitted what he thought he had missed, they said, well, actually, we think we owe you $15,000. So it was like, that was like, he only had 10%. He needed to add a zero onto what they owed him. And so he called me and said, man, I'm going to get you to pray for me more often.
My sister calls me from Africa because we're doing a project that we're trying to put a fence. And she says, we're building the fence, and now our neighbor is saying we are onto the road into his property, and we've done from the foundation to the wall. And it's a big property, and I'm like, oh my God. And anyways, to cut the story short, when Cameron came home, I told him, he's like, the enemy just wants to rip us off. Like, what is that? That means we needed to get surveyors, we needed to destroy everything if we were on the wrong. And she swears, she's like, oh my goodness, we did everything right. We went to the lawyers, surveyor, and everything. So I went into the courts of heaven with my sister because Cameron was at work. So I explained to her a little bit, and she's like, oh yeah, I get it, let's do it. We did it, and they had a meeting where the LC3 was coming, and local people, local officers, plus the neighbors, and the guy was giving us the problems didn't show up. Had a no-show. They tried to call him, he didn't, and then he said, oh well, maybe I mistook it, we never heard from him. Everything was solved. They continued to build a fence, and Praise we're like, God. Thank you, Jesus.
So my testimony is for my son Ethan. And when Val was teaching on releasing judgments, withdrawing judgments in the courtroom, and she was talking on that, teaching it. I remember she said she took one of her daughters and she had to release judgment on her. So when we did it and we were about to activate releasing judgments, God was speaking to me about a few people, but particularly my eldest son Ethan. And I was thinking to myself, I couldn't think of a time that I had passed judgment on Ethan, but obviously I did. And so, because God kept highlighting it to me, and I couldn't really figure out what. But so I go into the courts and I ask the clerk, I say, I want to release my judgments on my son. If there's any judgments that I've placed on Ethan, I want to release them. And for me, it's turning around and burning them. And so I did that. And so that was on Sunday. And the next week, I get a text from Ethan. And he's like, are you going to church on Sunday? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, okay, I'll see you there. And I'm like, so that was good. I mean, I didn't have to prompt him and ask him or text him. He asked me. And so I didn't realize this because he'd been working lots and, football when he was a bit younger. But so on Sunday, there's someone at the front. He says to me, who's that guy talking at the front? And I'm like, Chuck, our worship pastor. He's been here about a year. But he hadn't been here in probably close to a year. And I myself hadn't realized it had been that long. But so when I released that, I feel like when I released that judgment, he was texting me and all of a sudden he's in church. And I'm like, and so I didn't even think nothing of it that Sunday. Then the next Sunday, he texts me again. He's like, are you going to be in church? And I'm like, yeah, I'll be there. And so boom, he shows up again. And then it dawned on me, and God spoke to me when I was sitting there. And he told me it's because I released judgments on Ethan of why that's happening. Wow. And so the following Sunday, he brings his mom and his grandma. And so both of them aren't saved, and I don't want to get into a long story, but just to see them in church is an absolute miracle, just based on their past and their history of just terrible abuse and drug addictions and everything. But to see them in church is a miracle. And then again, they were here this Sunday again without Ethan because Ethan had to work. So it's just, praise God. So, but by releasing judgments on my son, I just found it like, boom, it happened. And then it compounded, and it's compounding. And now he's phoning, asking where his Bible is, and he's phoning me saying, God's given me a heart for business. I need you to set me up with people who know business. So we talked to Greg on Sunday. I'm going to try to hook him up with Greg or maybe a few other people. But just by releasing a simple act of something I didn't even see, I'm just watching things multiply like exponentially from week to week. So beautiful. Thank you guys. Praise God. I'd also like to thank Greg and Val for your teaching. I just want to honor you guys because, it's not easy. And you're receiving revelation from God, and then you're doing something with it, and you're releasing it to us and just giving us keys, I feel, to walk in freedom personally, for our families, for people we don't even know. So thank you guys.